Welcome to the Daily DLP. I'm your host, Ash Thompson, and today I'm going to get started previewing the Lions' playoff opponent, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Here's what I have to say about stopping the Bucs offense. Let's get it on. Things you need to understand about the Tampa Bay offense that have changed since last we had this discussion. And for those of you who did not hear that discussion, here's how it went in a nutshell. Baker was on pace for 30 touchdowns. This wasn't the garbage heap the Browns thought they were throwing him on. He also only had 2 interceptions in the first 4 games, and he ended the season with 28 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. So he stayed roughly on the same pace he started, but there was a big dip in the middle, and we're now dealing with a hot Baker Mayfield with a chip on his shoulder. Never good. Their offensive coordinator was just starting his first season as an NFL OC and had helped Geno Smith and Russell Wilson reach their highest highs as professional quarterbacks. I will be absolutely flabbergasted if he is not a head coach a month from now. There's no way with that track record of having been those 2 guys quarterback coaches when they did their best work. I just don't see how it's possible that anyone could not snap this guy up in a rebuild, particularly if they had a super high draft pick and were going to take one of the 5 first-round quarterbacks this year. Mayfield had the most touchdowns, highest completion percentage, second lowest interception percentage, and highest passer rating of his career, and he threw for over 4,000 yards for the first time. Because this is a Lions podcast, Goff threw for more yards, more touchdowns, but also more interceptions. But he fumbled fewer times than Mayfield did by the same amount, so they had the same number of turnovers. Honestly, there are a lot of parallels between our QB and theirs. Dumped after leading their original team to playoff success, generally regarded as done by NFL pundits before finding success with their new team. Right guy for the offense that they are running, but maybe not every offense in the NFL. So, I don't think Mayfield is going to be the reason that the Bucs lose this game, to be frank. He does what they want him to do in the way that they want him to do it right now. And their offense is entirely designed around what he can do and does do well. Sort of like Detroit's offense is built entirely around what Jared Goff is capable of, as it should be, as any sane offensive coordinator would do, yet somehow half the league doesn't get this memo every single year. Here's the key with Mayfield this week is, just don't give him a reason to be mad. A motivated Baker Mayfield is terrifying. He seems to be one of those players who actively feeds off the disrespect he feels that other people have given him. So just don't give him any bulletin board material. Be nice in the media this week. Talk about how great he is and how much you respect him and all that he's gone through and all that he's accomplished. If CJ Gardner-Johnson is listening, which he obviously is not, but if he happens to hear this, maybe just sit out this week's press galleries, man. Don't rile up Baker, please. If there has been a weakness in his game this season, it's been in man coverage. Just basically all of his counting stats are lower in man coverage situations. But this is a Lions podcast. And again, the one thing I don't ever want the Lions to do at any point is try to cover Mike Evans in single man coverage. So that's the first key. I feel like a broken record saying this because I know the Lions are probably never going to listen to me for some reason. But Mike Evans needs a ridiculous amount of attention. He's the guy, the single guy who can make this by himself a bad day for the Lions defense. Evans has been one of the league's most deadly red zone and deep threats for a decade at this point. If you're watching this show, you should be familiar with Mike Evans. He's exactly what teams who drafted players like T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, or Chase Claypool in the 2020 draft were hoping that they were getting. Spoiler alert, when I'm doing free agent content this offseason, 3 of the names I have mentioned at the wide receiver position are going to feature prominently in the discussion of ideal signings that the Lions could make. And the other one is Chase Claypool. If you think that guy has more than a 0% chance of ever being signed by a Brad Holmes or Dan Campbell team, I don't know what you've been watching for the last 3 years. Anyway, back to Evans. He gives the Bucs a weapon on the outside that most passing games only wish they had. But he's not the only dangerous player on their roster in the passing game. Like, the Bucs were middle of the league in most passing categories overall. Their attack as a whole isn't really that spectacular. Mayfield playing with the Browns never really had a lot of counting stats. That's why basically he set highs in everything this year. By design, the Browns play in Cleveland, not Tampa. They have to run the ball more to have any hope of winning. That's just a fact. But anyway, like, the Bucs were middle of the league, but it's not because they lacked receiver talent. Like, Chris Godwin actually led the Bucs in receptions this season, and he added 1,024 yards to Evans' 1,255, which means those 2 guys were more than half of the Bucs' passing attack. And that's why I don't really love this matchup. I didn't love it that week either, and they only ended up giving up 6 points. But I don't love this matchup for the Lions because those are 2 guys who can win against basically whatever coverage you put in front of them. The Lions corners can't handle this by themselves. They just can't. We watched the Eagles try to act like they had to lead cover guys when they didn't, and if the Bucs could catch that day, that game would have been over at halftime. You still have to cover everyone. Like, Cade Otton ended up being the actual leading receiver in that game for the Bucs. Tight end, not that many catches this year, but the dangerous thing that the Lions need to handle is these 2 outside receivers. The Bucs finished the season as the league's worst rushing attack, so staying in nickel is a key, as it always is. Even dime as much as possible, frankly. The reason you spend on the positions that deal with the running game more than the passing game, like defensive tackle and linebacker, is not to have to apply additional players to run support. This is a thing, like I've said this for years. If you want to stay in nickel or you want to play in dime defense a lot, you need to draft defensive tackles and linebackers to do that, and not 3 techniques who rush the passer, not linebackers who run 4.3 40s. Your 330-pound guy who gets you to third down is more important than the 285-pound guy who comes in only on third down to play inside. And side note here, for those incapable of understanding any level of nuance intuitively, I didn't just say you should pay the 330-pound guy $20 million a year to stop the run. Anyway, the Lions' big boys not named Aleem McNeil need to have a day here. Or if they're using the smaller guys, those boys need to have a day. Like, if John Kaminsky is the guy who clogs up the middle, great, somebody did it. Just somebody has to, so that the Lions can play 3 safeties as often as humanly possible. And I am counting the nickel as a safety here, as that is kind of Brad Branch's natural spot away from the nickel. If he gets moved anywhere, it is always going to be to a safety spot, not outside corner. But that's a completely different gig. The Lions move their guys around. Anyway, frankly, it's possible that Kaminsky and Pascal can get it done because the Bucs' interior offensive line is terrible. Like, that's the Achilles heel of this offense. Tristan Wirfs and Luke Goedeke are good offensive tackles on the edge. Good enough that the Bucs might even make the mistake of not doubling Aiden Hutchinson, which would be super cool. He's on fire right now, and a half a football where the Bucs decided to let him victimize the right tackle could be enough for the offense to put this game away. However, if the Bucs are smart enough to help their tackles, the Lions need to get that stunt and twist game going, because none of those 3 guys up the middle for the Bucs has any hope of slowing Aiden Hutchinson down in any way, shape, or form if they're left in space with them. Basically, whatever it takes, the Lions need to avoid giving Baker Mayfield time in the pocket like he had in their first meeting. Like, James Houston's return would be massive in this game if he can actually, play. Whatever it takes for the Lions to do that, literally any means necessary. Baker missed a bunch of open, deep balls in the first matchup, and that's the reason the score was what it was. He missed enough of them that hitting them would have flipped the score the other way by a wide margin. If they try to get the ball deep, Baker needs to end the rep in the dirt. So, you can't rely on Baker Mayfield to make mistakes, to take his team out of the game right now. He's just not doing it. Which means you actually need to put resources into stopping his best receivers, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, which you can do by playing nickel and even dime defenses on early downs. But to do that, you need to be able to stop the run out of those personnel groups, which the Lions can do because the Bucs' interior offensive line is terrible. So Kaminsky and Pascal might actually be able to hold up in the middle beside Aleem McNeil. And those later personnel groups also give you the best chance of getting to Baker before he can get the ball deep like he did in week 6. Because he's hitting those throws at this point in the season. And that is how the Lions D wins this game in the broad strokes. Tomorrow I'll tell you what the Lions need to accomplish on offense.